Welcome to the Outlier Mindset. I'm Dr. Monique Samir. As an entrepreneur, I've developed values for my companies and also spent a lot of time figuring out my own core values. It might sound weird to talk about corporate values and personal values at the same time, but I think there's a lot of parallels between this, where we can learn between the two. So I'm going to be talking about how I go about developing corporate values, but I link that to understanding your personal values. There's often tools that we can borrow from business and use in our own personal lives. I really like that duality of borrowing things that work from one area and using them in another. So that's what I'm going to do here with values, and I hope this is useful to you in your personal life, or maybe you're looking at starting up a business, or you are running and leading a business and you're working on developing your values. So what I do is I group values into 5 categories that helps me to really narrow down what my authentic core values are. The first one is permission to play. The second is aspirational. The third is stated values. The fourth is accidental values. And the fifth is your authentic core values. I'm going to dig into each of those now. The first one, permission to play. I go over this first because you can rule out a lot of things that you might think are values by understanding this one. Permission to play, or sometimes I call it a seat at the table, are the values that you can't necessarily reward somebody for having extra of, but it is a deal breaker if they don't have. I often see companies having these in their stated values. So it's things like honesty, integrity. How do you give somebody a bonus for behaving honestly? And I do get some pushback on this from some people where they say, well, there's just being honest day to day, but then there's bringing up a difficult thing that maybe an error that's happened or an issue they've seen with a client. And I would counter that and say, that's not necessarily just honesty, that's going beyond into something more like bravery. And I know I'm being a word nerd here, but it's important to really think about the meaning of these words and the behaviors associated with them in terms of developing the company values as well as your own values. So something like honesty, if somebody's not honest, they don't get to work there. You might actually even let somebody go if they behave dishonestly. Other ones, I'm just looking at the list from my last company. Permission to play things were teamwork was something that was just a necessary thing that we did in our company. So that might not apply to all companies, but it did apply to ours. And we explain that to people in the hiring process so that they know this is just the foundations that, if you want to work here, these are baseline behaviors that you need to have. Then you get into things like stated values. Stated values are the ones that you see on the wall, but nobody really knows what they mean to them. They don't guide their day-to-day behaviors. And when you think about the stated values, this is maybe an old example, so people my age or older will know it. Maybe some of the younger folks have read about it, but just making sure I get them right here. When you look at something like Enron had communication, respect, integrity, and excellence. Well, we all know the Enron story. Those were definitely not the things that they valued in their company. What does this mean to you, though? I mean, you check the box, you have corporate values, you're good, right? It's something you need to do. Well, if you just do stated values and don't do anything more around that, you've missed an opportunity. Because a true value should be something that you can place value on and also creates value for the company. This also matters in your personal values because a true value is something that both gives value to you in your life, it improves your life by having that value, but also it's something that you value, meaning you're going to place effort into it, you're going to prioritize in your life, and you're going to make decisions around it. So it's important that you don't just have stated values, but that you know your actual authentic values. That gets into the accidental values that happen in a company. So this happens either when a company doesn't have clear values, they're using permission to play values, or they have stated values that are not acted upon. And what happens in a company culture is you begin to develop accidental values. Those accidental values could be good or they could be bad, but they create confusion. You might actually value teamwork, but if you end up giving a bonus to the person who always delivers the biggest sales, even at the expense of others, or by claiming ownership of something somebody else did in your company, you're accidentally valuing things that are against teamwork. You're showing that you value dishonesty. You have to think about, what are you actually rewarding? So in a company, you could look at, what did you actually issue bonuses for last year? And there's going to be what you wrote down about it, but you're going to have to do some digging and some retrospective analysis here and think, how did that person actually achieve those things? If it is high sales, did they achieve it through teamwork? Did they achieve it through working 100-hour weeks? Do you value both of those things equally? Do you want to be rewarding one behavior or another? Look at the root causes or the root behaviors that led to that person having an outcome that you gave a bonus to. As a human, as an individual, figuring out how you show that value to yourself is also important. As an example, I could say that I value fitness, but if I don't actually do behaviors around that, that would just be a stated value. So I'm saying I value fitness, but do I actually schedule time for fitness? Do I actually eat healthy? Am I doing the actions that are needed with it, or is it just that stated one on the wall? Accidental values can also be good, where people are doing great things that you actually value in the company. But the problem is, how can other people know that you value that? How can it be really clear for people in their day-to-day to make decisions that create value for the company and that you value if they're just accidental, if you're not clear about them, if they're not purposeful? So that's the issue with accidental values. Now we get to our fourth one, aspirational values. And this is one that I often get a lot of conversation around when developing company goals. Well, shouldn't we have a value that we aspire to be? Yes, absolutely. But an aspirational value is one that you just hope happens. You aspire to it, but what actions are you taking to ensure that that's going to happen? And the issue here is when you don't pair actionable items, actionable measures to a value, you lose the opportunity to really get the most out of it. Aspirational values are usually well-intentioned, but they lack the follow-through on setting up the systems, processes, and operations that allow the team members and also the company to benefit from that value. So it's unclear how doing that behavior actually leads to a value for the individual. And that leads to the last, which is the authentic values. So this could be something that you aspire to, but what you've done is you've paired it with actionable outcomes. It's very clear to the team members what you value, what that looks like, and how you are going to value it. An actual authentic core value, whether it is within a company or your personal values, should both create value and be possible to value. And what do I mean by that? My last company had the values of always evolving, be the catalyst, and celebrate uniqueness. So I'll use the example of be the catalyst here. Be the catalyst, we had 5 or 6 different examples for them so they could really understand what that looked like. And it was a scientific firm, okay? So they all understood what a catalyst is. A catalyst is something that enables a reaction to go faster without being used up in the process. So we wanted people to take that initiative to get things done. What that looked like was being flexible in your work hours. For example, there might be a day where you stay 30 minutes later to get some work done. Because if you had stopped right then, it would have taken 4 hours the next day to restart and get it all done. We realize that is a sacrifice for that person to do that, but it creates value for the company by being more efficient in the work that we do. In return, we value that in our people and we show them we value it by giving them bonuses, time off, work flexibility, additional growth and learning opportunities, or they could suggest something else that really worked for them. And it should be easy to give that value back to your team members, whether it's money or time off or all these things that truly do cost a company, because their behavior in demonstrating that value, that core authentic corporate value, that actually creates value for the company, meaning it makes the company more money. Or it may have a second or third order effect where it improves client satisfaction. But improving client satisfaction means you eventually do make more money or have better profit margins or have a decreased marketing budget because you have repeat customers. So with a company, it's usually pretty clear. At the end of the day, you either need to increase top line revenue or increase profitability. So you develop these authentic values for a company. And I always recommend don't have more than 3 to 5 core values for a company. You then need to take those core values and ensure that your team members know them and live them. And especially in the early days when you're just starting to roll them out, there should be frequent rewards associated with those values. So not just an annual review, but it could be weekly, a stand-up where people give kudos to people demonstrating core values. In weekly updates, there's a category in there to give kudos to somebody for core values that you've seen. When we would do lessons learned after a project for looking for improvements and also for the things that we want to replicate in future projects, we would look at where the core values were demonstrated or where we could have done better at them. It needs to be part of your everyday in the business, and it becomes part of your actual language in the company. We laugh about it. We know it's kind of cheesy sometimes, but when people know very clearly these actions, these behaviors are going to create value for the company because they are our core values, and they will be rewarded for that because the company values them, that becomes invaluable. So keep it to 3 to 5 because it has to be something that people can remember. I think 1 or 2 is not enough, ideally 3, but if you had to expand, up to 5 is okay. But what does that mean for you as a person? In a personal sense, it's really not that different. What are the things that create value in your life? What are the things that enhance your life and make your life better? How do you then give value to it? Well, you can give value by placing energy into it, making it a priority. It's just a little bit of a reframing of the mindset on it. I hope you enjoyed going down that rabbit hole of values with me today. I really hope you'll try some of these things out. And until next time, let your light shine.